Hi everyone, welcome to Inside SONOR Family. I'm your host, Zack Stewart, coming to you as always from a drum studio here in Nashville, Tennessee. And joining me today from the great north of Winnipeg, Canada, is the wonderful Mr. Aaron Edgar. Aaron, how are you today?
Hey man, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. This is gonna be a lot of fun, man. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm a big fan of SONOR drums, so we got lots to talk about.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, we're going to get to all that. I think this will be to end the first season. We could not have a more SONOR nerd explosion of other than you and I just sitting here geeking out on drums. But we'll get to that in time. So, you're such a busy guy with obviously playing in different projects like you have Third Eye on. Teaching, writing books. I was actually just looking over some of the sample stuff and a few of the lessons things you put out for your drumming book, Progressive Drumming Essentials. Columns in Modern Drummer, all the Drumeo courses, which is actually one of the first times I saw some of your stuff was one of the breakdown videos you did. Awesome. So, you're a very busy man doing a lot of different things. I kind of started all of these by asking everybody, how has their schedule changed? What they've been up to? What's keeping them motivated during all this craziness with the COVID pandemic?
Man, well, that's obviously impacted most musicians quite seriously. I've been very fortunate that I got hooked up with Drumeo probably about 10 years ago. I started doing some work with them. And it actually worked out great because we were launching a new thing called Coaches over the past little bit. And there was opportunity for me to just take on a little more responsibility at Drumeo. So as much as gigging and normal kind of musician work was drying up a little bit because we're under lockdown until 2 days ago. This is the first haircut I've had in probably 4 months. It was killing me. But yeah, seriously, I've been really working really hard with Drumeo. We got that Coaches launched, which was super fun. It's a very cool thing that we've added to the site there. But yeah, that's been keeping me crazy busy. So between that, working on a new Third Eye on record, we're maybe 70% through writing it. It's way weirder than the previous stuff. I don't know if that's a good thing or what, but it's adventurous. We'll just say that.
Yeah. No, that's great, man. I'm always glad to hear when someone's able to kind of not have to change the direction of the ship too much in all of this. I've seen everything in this industry from people just sort of said, I'm out, to they've been able to find other avenues of work. And not only financially, but just we all love to do this. So it's something that, you got to get the creativity out. We all love doing this. And of course it's a profession, but there's still just that love of doing it. Like I said, whether it be performing, teaching, whatever. So yeah, I didn't realize you've been with the Drumeo guys that long. Now, obviously, with them, you're doing online teaching. Are you able to do any in-person teaching, or is that kind of on hold with the COVID situation?
Yeah, well, that had to make a transition as well. I still do private teachings. My Mondays are usually just packed every week. But it all had to go to online stuff. So as much as I did have some local guys that were coming to the house, here's the thing being with Drumeo for the past 10 years, there's just so much of my stuff online that most of my students don't live anywhere near me. So most of them were digital anyway, just going through either Skype or FaceTime or whatever. I really just had to trade over the few guys that are still here to that. They were kind of reluctant at first because, it's fun coming here, right? But it's from Disneyland. So yeah.
Nah, well, I'm sure that it changes your reach. I was actually last week's episode we had a fellow Canadian, Manuel Capelet on, and she was just talking about all the different students she has that she's able to have access to through the online platform. That obviously, if it was an in-person lesson, you're limited to who's within a driving range for any kind of regular instruction. So that's pretty cool. So how did you get involved, as far as the teaching side of things go? When did that really take off for you?
Well, that was actually kind of almost a bit of a weird story. That happened for me really, really early. This almost may seem weird coming from a musician, but I got into music without any sort of musical aspirations whatsoever. It was junior high, we had to pick between art or band. And drums literally just seemed like the most fun choice of what was in front of me. There was of the other instruments, that was the coolest one that they offered at the school. And it was either that or somebody's going to teach me how to draw a bowl of fruit or something. That seemed way less fun. So anyway, I got into it from purely an academic side of things. So I kind of latched on to just, learning was exciting for me on the drums. So from like even my first year, the teachers in the school had me helping the other kids and stuff. I excelled at it pretty much immediately. So it just kind of made sense. Like before I was even out of junior high, I kind of realized it's like, well, my drum teacher's an adult and he's doing this thing professionally. Well, that just seems like something I should get really good at. So I just pretty much from immediately was just interested in learning and the process of learning. And I don't know, I find it a fun, it's to me a creative outlet just like any other musical thing as well, because everybody kind of learns differently. So let's say you've got a couple ways you usually teach something. Some students maybe don't connect with that. So now your job becomes figuring out how is this person going to understand the thing I'm trying to convey to them? And my usual tools don't work right now. So you kind of learn more about learning and you gain more problem-solving tools for yourself as well. So I think I ran off your point there on a tangent, but yeah.
No, man, I totally get what you're saying. I've done teaching over the years, not necessarily too much of a private student base, but some clinics and stuff like that. But one thing I was doing quite, for years now, I've been involved in the the marching percussion world and work with the band program here in Nashville. And, it's hard to even say with the last 20 years of teaching in that world, what that's done for my understanding of drumming, because it's even a weirder situation of, having to develop skills so that like when I get this kid who's a freshman whose mom is like, no, you're going to do marching band. He doesn't want to be there. His mom's making him be there. Yet I have to produce a competent player out of this. So it's like, all right, of course, over time you got to trick the motivation a little bit, but you got to find ways, like you said, to kind of get through to every student. You know what I mean? That platform you're dealing with them all at once, but I'm sure on a one-to-one level, it just makes you kind of peel back what you're doing and say, all right, if I've really got this concept down, it's kind of my fault if this guy can't get it, or if I can't find a way for them to get it.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm probably going to butcher this quote, but I think it was Einstein that said, if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough.
Yeah, very true. That's one thing I always, because we've all been guilty of when we were younger teachers, or newer teachers, I should say, is, over-explaining. And a lot of times in the drumline world, when I work with some staff members who are newer in their teaching career, and it's just, the chunk of music the kids played was 45 seconds, and they're on minute 14 of an explanation about it. I'm like, just no, we've already lost it, man. Just hit the erase button and let's start back over.
Totally.
So I think a lot of people, as we were saying earlier, have decided to look into some different avenues within music and drumming in particular. Whether it be developing more of an online presence, perhaps if they were teaching, maybe building up more of an online teaching base, since maybe they're like, they can't do the in-person thing. You have done such a large catalog of teaching material. Like, obviously, you've written a book. To me, that just sounds like Mount Everest. I have all these ideas. I'm like, oh man, to sit down and like put it all together. So kudos to you, my friend.
Thanks,
but laying out the Drumeo courses, you had I think you've had one or maybe more regular series, kind of columns there in Modern Drummer.
Yeah. Well, it was one that kind of just, it started out, it was supposed to be a year, but it's been like 5 running solid now, so.
Okay, yeah. So, there you go. And so anybody who does that at that level, one thing you always hear is, you have to be organized, because you literally are just doing that. You're organizing the material, you're organizing yourself. And I'm kind of like really into learning everybody's way of doing that, because obviously everybody has a different one, how they get to it. So for the aspiring teachers out there, or someone who's maybe wanting to get into more education, or maybe get into some publishing stuff, whether it be a book, whether it be articles for drum magazines, what kind of tips would you give that person to start organizing those ideas and put it together to where it's in a presentable format for one of those mediums? Cool.
I've probably got sort of like 2 separate but interrelated kind of ideas that I think would be helpful for that. One is just like write obsessively. I think one of the reasons this comes just like really naturally to me is that, when I was first learning this stuff, again, I came from more of an educational side than like, oh, I want to be like this drummer. It just hadn't occurred to me yet. Of course, I fell in love with music through this, but like, I was obsessively writing when I was a kid because, like, you know, I couldn't record myself. I didn't have a studio or anything like that. And if I came up with a cool idea, I didn't even have like something like an iPhone I could just record it on. So I had to write down this idea, otherwise it would be gone by the time I'm playing something else 2 minutes from now, you know? So I've basically amassed thousands and thousands and thousands of sheets of just like every little drum idea I've ever had and where I like to explore with them. Generally, I'll come up with an idea, and then to me, it just becomes a game of like messing with it. Like, okay, well, what can I do with this? It sounds great this way. What else can happen? Next thing I know, there's like 2 or 3 pages of just variations and things that evolved out of this initial idea. I think that is super important for somebody that wants to start putting together, material of any sort of depth anyway, because like, with that sort of backlog, you can kind of get a bigger picture understanding of how music and like the pieces to put them together works, you know? So that's one thing. But as far as like how to actually put it together, I feel like my process, it's a little quick. Like it doesn't even necessarily take all that much organization. Generally, I'll take a brainstorm session and just like think up, okay, what do I want to write about? And maybe take like 20 of say 100 ideas I pick out, like say these ones are my favorites. And then when it comes down to actually like putting one of those into like an article or a chapter or something, my first thing is just a complete brain dump. It's like, okay, so we're taking polyrhythmic displacement of whatever. Okay, well, just start writing some cool ideas. So I get out the notation paper, I get out a pencil. Yes, I do it the old school way. I don't do it on a computer or anything. And I just write. And I just write and write and write until I'm like, oh, that's cool. That looks like it's going to be really fun. And as soon as I find these little things that kind of excite me on the page, generally those turn into more ideas, they evolve. I'll basically write enough stuff that I've got maybe 3 times what I would need for an article, pick my favorites, and then just write how to get from here to there. And by the time I've finished a single sitting at this, I've usually got an article that I just basically need to edit and make sure it's coherent.
Yeah. No, I think that lines up with a lot of other things you hear. Another, whether it be a writer for like TV show, comedy, is that you have to be writing all the time, And I think what people don't get, and maybe it's a little bit on social media, is that whether it be yourself who's putting out material, whether it be what they see somebody play online or Instagram, they go, no one ever sees the work, or if you're writing, they don't see the bad ideas.
No.
If you're a player, unless you're just doing it to like show them the process, they don't see the 20 takes where you just fell on your face trying to play it, So I think there's a bit of a assumption sometimes people have when they see it. They're like, oh, this person just sat down, set up their camera, or just sat down and in 5 minutes they had an article written, or they just had this lick figured out and played and it was done, I think it's good for them to hear that it's a lot more than that,
Well, I agree. I think that's even like kind of just a symptom of our sort of like social media environment we find ourselves in, where like things are short, just like tiny little snippets of stuff. People, one thing that I kind of hear a lot from people, obviously I have to talk to thousands and thousands of students through like Drumeo and whatnot, is like people seem, maybe not overwhelmingly, but a lot of people I hear talking about getting kind of stressed out by that. Like they'll be scrolling through their Instagram feed and it's just like, oh, here's 1,000 drummers doing things I can't even comprehend. Like, where do I even start? I think, this is kind of like slightly off where we're going with that, but I think it's important to understand that like to get to any of those places requires a type of diving into just development for this, maybe not for the sake of development, but just like for you're passionate about developing this thing. So you sink into doing that and it turns into these things. It's not so much, oh, here's all this icing, Yeah.
Yeah, no, honestly, I'd be lying if I say I haven't had that moment myself over the years. I remember even back for like Instagram, like Facebook was hitting, and I was like, a lot of my friends in Nashville are, touring musicians, so the weekends when everybody's out. And it was like, I think it was like a Saturday, and it just like clicked for me one day, like, man, we're all in the same boat. Everybody takes the good crowd photo. Everybody takes, you're aware of what you're putting out, So I kind of just, after seeing like 4 or 5 posts from friends, I went, well, apparently everybody played for the greatest crowd ever tonight. Like all my friends did. And I know you didn't, but I can totally understand though, as someone who doesn't, I'm sure some of it has to do with age and experience, just that confidence of doing this. But but yeah, I can totally get how they get overwhelmed, and it can create probably some mental hurdles for them, just having that constant thing in front of their face of seeing what other players are doing, seeing the other gear people have, all that stuff, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of the root of most problems anyway. It's just like worrying about what other people are up to. Get excited about the thing that you're doing and dive in, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, saying that, I'm sure many people watching this will be very jealous of all the drums you have behind you. So let's just get into that.
Sure. Yeah.
But no, man, let's start at the beginning of it. So obviously, much like myself, you're happy to play Sonar drums, but you just feel a passion for the brand and for everything they're about. So why don't we just start at the beginning, man? How did you get involved with playing Sonar and, of course, becoming an artist with the company?
Yeah, well, man, it started super early for me. I still vividly recall this moment. I was like 16 years old. I walked into my drum teacher's basement, and he's like, man, you got to check out this record. So he tosses on the first Vital Tectones record, which is obviously Steve Smith, Victor Wooten, Scott Henderson, ridiculous prog. I'd never heard anything like it. I was like into Pantera and stuff like that. So, drums that sound like samples and slappy and whatnot. I didn't know what drums could actually sound like. And the first thing on this record is just this big open groove. Boom. Steve just laying it down. Then he does this shreddy fill down the toms. And it's just like, I couldn't believe how amazing those drums sounded. I'd never heard anything like it in my life. And then the band kicked in and it was amazing too. It's seriously like that moment changed so much stuff for me, but it was like it sparked this just obsession with how, honestly, it was how lush those toms sounded. I searched for that for probably a decade after that. And I mean, Sonar drums are expensive. So as a 16-year-old, I'm not buying a designer kit. That's not going to happen. So I tried everything that I could afford. I tried all the other brands. I found some stuff you could get used. There was way less Sonar stuff in Canada at the time. So it's, finding a good used kit was pretty much impossible. But I never really found that sound. No matter how much time I spent with a kid, no matter how much it was tuning or heads or whatever, it was literally just those drums. So one day I find myself at a music store and they had a Thomas Lang clinic kit. It was a D-Lite, the old school square badge, like that one right over your shoulder there.
Yes.
Yeah, it was in brilliant black. And I saw it sitting up on this shelf. So I talked to the guy behind the counter, worked out an unbelievable deal for it. And I was like, there's no way I'm leaving this drum kit here. So I went home, got the thing I agreed to trade for it, picked it up, brought it back to my place. I cleaned it up before I played anything. I literally just took it apart before I hit anything. It was kind of, a little bit beat, it was a little bit filthy. So I gave it a good once over. And I tuned her all up. I set it up. And I had a similarly large kind of prog kit. This was just 2 rack toms, a floor tom, and a kick. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do my practicing on this D-Lite kit. And then my reward will be playing on my big prog kit. Go over there and have fun. No joke. The first time that I sat down and played that kit, I was just like, it's just what those drums sounded like. I couldn't believe it. It wasn't studio magic. It was just, oh my God, these things actually sound like that? It had been 10 years of me failing to find it. I basically surrendered to the idea that this was maybe, some crazy tweaks in a studio board somewhere that I didn't understand. Nope. These things just sounded like that. No joke, I packed up everything I had that wasn't Sonar and sold it. Basically from then on, it was just it's nothing else will do. I don't care what it costs. I'm going to save up. That's just the deal. So, man, they sound so good. I couldn't believe it. And then, so at that point in my life, I was already gigging professionally. Pretty much right out of high school, I was gigging and teaching, enough to make a living at it. So that's just what I did. That was my job. And, I didn't have any endorsements or anything like that, but I had these drums and obviously I was super passionate about it. So, every once in a while clinics would roll through. So I ended up meeting the artist relations manager up here in Canada, Scott Atkins, super awesome dude. Love that guy. One thing led to another. He kind of just saw I had some cool stuff going on. He was looking to expand Sonar in Canada and the artist roster. As far as I know, I was the 12th Canadian Sonar artist ever.
Wow.
Which felt kind of crazy. And it was also my first ever endorsement. Yeah. So that happened in 2007. And I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. It's funny, I had some similar stuff early in my experiences with Sonar. I was actually telling this story, I think, on an earlier episode of one of these where I saw Danny Carey play at the Big Potato, and he was playing his old, I think it would probably been a Phonic or, signature kit. It was an 80s kit. I wasn't as, at the time, I just knew they sounded amazing. I was literally sitting next to him, and the next day I went to Hollywood Pro Drum. They had one Sonar kit. I believe it would have been either a Designer or a Delight in the kind of Azul kind of finish there. Mm-hmm. And I had another drum set that I was literally sleeping next to on a floor in a one-bedroom apartment with 2 other roommates in LA. So I didn't have any money. So it was like, okay, well, they're like, yeah, we'll take all that drum set you have, all that hardware, everything, and all we can give you are these 4 drums. They couldn't give me they were just like, we don't have the stand, we had to order it. I'm like, so it just like delayed the finally, getting a kit. But man, I totally get that of, there's just something about, the sound, the feel, and especially like, like with the D-Lite, I had a Pro Light kit before, and, I kind of funny story I like to tell people is my girlfriend was very pregnant at the time and asleep, and I had a gig the next day, and I had to change, my other kit was somewhere else, I had to change heads in this kit, couldn't tune it, it's the middle of the night, I'm not gonna wake her up, and so I just put the heads on there, tuned what felt right. It's like, okay, when we get to gig tomorrow, it's like a short set. It's kind of like it was like a TV thing. I'll just tune them up, and got them out of the cases, put them on stands, hit them, and I was like, oh, no, we're good to go. No tuning needed. Like, so it's like, but I get quite a few times over the years where I've had quite a few times where I can't get a Sonar kit when I travel, and so I do have to, play with other manufacturers' drums for one-off or whatever, and
yeah.
I'm not just saying it, man. It's a struggle sometimes, granted, sometimes it's different heads, and I'm not going to blame it all on the drums, but it's like, I've yet to find any Sonar kit that I can't just pretty quickly get a sound that I'm happy with, if not just right 100%. Out the gate,
Yeah, I completely feel the same way about backline kits. Like back when I was freelancing a lot more, you're lucky to get a Sonar once in a while, at the very least, even in Canada, but, it's always really nice when it happens, but when it's not, it's just... Again, I don't know if it's just, it's probably not just the Toms, but there's something about them that's just like, it is hugely lacking in every other brand I've ever heard compared to what I want to hear out of them,
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I have all my crazy theories that I don't think there's anything to back it up. And I do think, one, seriously, undersized shell, because
100%.
I've actually, some other drums I've played over the years, like for example, old LA Camcos, which you can't, they don't exist anymore. Had a set of those, loved them. And not only they sound great, they felt great. They felt like Sonars. And then I found out the LA Camco shells are undersized. So I think there's something to be said about the undersized. They're not as undersized, I believe, or were as undersized as the Sonar shell is, but they were considerably more than a standard shell width, So I'm like, maybe that's it, on the die-cast hoops, like a hella hoop just feels perfect to me. A normal die-cast hoop, I don't really dig, but a hella hoop, I'm like, yes, like again, so those little things, man, they feel different to me, and obviously I think you would agree. So, man, there obviously there's something there, who knows exactly what the science is.
Yeah, I think it's part that. I think it's part the vertical construction, but and maybe like well, I wanted to say part the APS stuff where there's no kind of like metal to wood contact, but that's not the case on some of the older drums that still sound unbelievable. So I think probably the undersized, that vertical grain stuff. Of course, the craftsmanship too. Like, have you been to the factory?
I have, man. Yeah.
Oh, dude, man, watching those people work on those drums, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't. Like, I think one of the most, actually, there were 2 moments that were like particularly profound there. Actually, and one that was funny, just from a second ago, when we were talking about Hella hoops. I remember when I got to the factory, I didn't realize that was the brand Hella. I just thought they were like super heavy hoops. So people were like, oh, these are Hella hoops. No joke. I thought that's what they were. They laughed at me for saying that shit. Oh, man. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if I can drop an S-bomb there, but.
It's all right.
Yeah, great. Yeah, anyway, so a couple things from the factory that were like crazy. I guess, for the drum side of things was watching the dude in the spray booth. Because like, I think he was doing up a Nussbaum Pro Light kit. So that nice kind of burgundy finish. And it's just like, you'd think it was done by a machine, not having known. And I came in with this kind of assumption. So we get there and I'm looking in the spray booth. There's this dude. He's got a drum shell on this sort of I guess, pedestal he's rotating by hand. He's got a spray can that he's doing again by hand. There's nothing automated about this one whatsoever. And then I watched the guy go from like maybe 5 seconds in a single pass. Perfect. Picks up another drum. Same thing. 5 seconds, done. Looks like finished. I'm like, what am I watching? This doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
And then like the other thing, oh man, the sound bars from their like xylophone glockenspiel type things or whatever.
The Orff, yeah.
Yeah, that stuff. The people that were tuning those, they completely blew me away because before we even got to that, they were showing me this crazy high-tech machine. It was in this like glass cabinet. Thing was giant and it had like, everything was automated. This little arm came and picked him up, brought him over to this little microphone station and dinged it, sort of detected, it had like an oscilloscope. So it knew sort of where it needed to go as far as like grinding off some of the material to make it into the pitch it wants. So it took like 45 seconds or whatever to go through its whole cool automated processes, computer screens. It's all kind of interesting and everything. But then we turn around and there's just like a dude in a sound booth by hand taking these sound bars, got a little grinder in front of him and a little sort of mallet. Just like ding, grind, ding, looks at the oscilloscope, done. Again, way more efficient than the machine. Around every corner in that place, it was just blowing me away. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. No, I think they could do videos of it. I just don't know if there's, and again, you hate to make it always a comparison against how anything else is manufactured, but a couple of things similar to that. There's a great podcast called the Drum History Podcast that I don't know if you've ever checked out. There's a guy here in the States that does it. It's really cool. Actually, we were kind of discussing about him doing a Sonor one. Cool. He wants to, he's just trying to get all the stuff together. But one thing that I've kind of taken away from it is actually when he starts breaking down with some of these other kind of heritage brands, which are still newer than Sonor, they made around since 1900 or something, is how much change there has been in the company's just been like shut down and restarted and moved. And like, that was, for me, the biggest moment was actually in the Shell department. And they were making little notes on like, I saw numbers written down on a piece of paper and actually on a piece of wood. And I asked, guy gave me the tour and he said, he goes, they know like if they pick it up, this is how like experienced these people are. If they pick up the plies, which are never going to be perfect, right? You're slicing up a log. Yeah. So they can, if they just feel that's a little thicker, they know that when they go to wrap that around, they're going to need to make adjustments for that. And like, whereas anybody else would say, no, we cut it this length. That's just what we cut it at. And over time, that's probably going to maybe warp a little bit, because maybe it didn't reach over further. Maybe it was over, I don't know, exactly the science on shell construction. But I was like, okay, that sells it. I mean, not that any doubts before, but I'm like, dude, no one else is doing this. You know what I'm saying? They're just grabbing a stack of plies, putting them in there, press, boom, done, go home. I was like, you can't replace that, No. I mean, it's true boutique in a way because you have people who are like really understanding the material, but then it's produced at a mass level that, you're not, it's not just they make one drum kit a year kind of company,
Totally.
But yeah, it's definitely a magical place if people can make it over to Germany whenever the world opens back up. I highly recommend you reach out to those guys because it's so cool to see firsthand,
Yeah. I really enjoyed being there. It was a super, super cool experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I had a similar situation with Hella as well. I was like, I just thought they were like, hella cool. And then like Carl Hines was like, explaining to me, he's like, it's one of the largest companies in the world, Hella. I'm like, what? And he explained to me about the metal on a headlamp on a car. Yeah. They manufacture that. So by default, they're like one of the largest. I was like, oh. And I Googled it. I'm like, good thing I didn't like say, like, yeah, they are hella cool, So, probably would have gotten a laugh. But, well, I mean, honestly, besides like, the new stuff you've got, man, much like myself, you're a fan of some of the older stuff that Sonor has produced. Mm-hmm. What kind of made you start to dig into a little bit of the kind of collecting side of some of the older gear?
Well, I mean, kind of like my first experience with Sonor is just like it just doesn't seem to matter what I pick up. It always just sounds amazing, Like, Of course, I started with all the modern gear because that's what I was buying when I was first starting into that. But like, getting an eye on some of those SIGs or even the phonic kits. And I mean, even the 60s kits. Like, actually, that is, I guess, how I got started into this. Because before I was even a Sonor artist, there was an old 60s just Well, it's right over there. One of those red kind of crackle bop kits that was sitting in a studio that I would occasionally go and practice at with various bands. And I remember just loving this kit, just like a 13, 16, 20, had the matching snare. Just sounded unbelievable. Super, super nice drums. And yeah, one day, like just through crazy course of events, that kit came into my care and it just like sounded amazing. So like from taking care of that thing for a little while, I just got a taste for, well, I think Beach, I've just got a huge hard on for. Like both my SQ2 kits are Beach, pretty much all the vintage, well, I shouldn't say all, but the majority of the vintage stuff seems to be Beach, and it all just sounds incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the Beach stuff SONOR does, but one thing I love too is like any other stuff I've ever played, I also dig it too. Obviously the maple here on the D-Light kit, SQ1s I've used with birch, and I've had like actually an old light snare that was great, and yeah, it's kind of like whatever you land. And I've even got just picked up recently an old 70s acrylic kit.
Cool.
And yeah, dude, it just sounds great, like and always again going back to something that separates SONOR, like I've played, I've never owned acrylic drums. I've played other acrylic kits from other manufacturers. This one's different. It doesn't kind of have the stuff I didn't like about acrylic, especially when we're talking about recording. Maple on this kit, while it's got the characteristics of maple, it's still got something different. The birch has something different. And then, Beech, I think if you're going to get Beech drums, why would you get anything but SONOR? They're the ones who do it the best,
Exactly.
There's something across that. I honestly think we could probably do a bonus episode just on your collection, but to kind of whittle it down for the nerds at home that are wondering all this stuff, the next season I'm going to redo this, I guess, so I can show my collection more. But what can you give us some of your kit inventory that you have? Just if you can remember it off the top of your head.
Yeah, I probably can't remember all of it. I think there's about 170 drums in this room, but I think I've got 8 kits. It's almost silly that I don't know off the top of my head. Anyway, I've got the heavy Beech SQ2s, the Stratowoods is what I'm sitting at right now. I've got a vintage Beech SQ2 kit. These are all giant kits, by the way. Whenever I ordered a kit, I have trouble just picking something. So I kind of want to get all the toms and a selection of kicks. So I kind of just make whatever I want out of that type of shell. So that's kind of why there's just so many drums here. Obviously, I've got a snare obsession, but my kits are mostly all gigantic, short of that 60s thing. Maybe one of my teaching kits.
Interrupt you there. So I love the vintage shell, what we call vintage, which is the thin shell with the reed rings. It's on the Pro Light and D-Lights.
Yeah.
But because I love Beech, I've actually thought about getting an SQ2 kit with that. Just for my own sake. Sorry, everybody watching at home, you have to listen to me ask questions. But how would you compare that to because I think Benny Greb actually, before he was playing the vintage series, his SQ2 kit was a vintage Beech.
Yep.
Obviously sounds great, But yeah, you got the whole kit. So how do you compare that to the vintage maple sound?
It's been a while since I've had a Pro Light kit, but I play one whenever I'm over at actually, I shouldn't say whenever I'm over at Drumeo. They just got an SQ1 and I love that kit. It actually sounded amazing. It really surprised me. Not that I was expecting it to not sound amazing, but as with a lot of SONOR things, you sit down and it's just wow, this is even better than I expected. Super great.
Yeah.
I feel like with the Beech one, I get a touch more of the low than we do on the maple equivalent, like in the vintage shell.
Interesting.
There's maybe a hint less snap, but obviously if you want that, you can deal with it with heads. Have you ever tried S-hoops on the top of your toms?
No, I've done it on a couple of snares, never on the toms.
Man, you should try that out. They're, I feel like it enhances the Woody character just a little bit, and it gives you a touch more of that snap on it too. So, whereas again, some of the Beech stuff feels like it maybe has a slight less of that. Putting an S-hoop on top, it's just not the case anymore.
Okay, yeah, I'll give that a try then. Yeah, there's a guy here in town who stocks those, so I'll pay him a visit this week.
Excellent.
But yes, back to your.
That.
Yeah, for sure. Well, back to your collection there.
Right. So we covered the 2 SQ2 kits. I've got an S Classics kit that's bigger than all the rest of them because I got all the floor toms and all the suspended toms. When they discontinued it, I was just kind of we got a week, I could buy more components. I should probably get everything. I couldn't help myself. Then there's that. What else is there for modern kits? I've also got a giant Force Select that I gig on a lot. I've got an Ascent kit. I've got a big phonic kit, super giant sizes. I've got those Sig Heavy Bubingas that are just like drop dead gorgeous. And those ones, serial numbers under 100, like one of the first kits they made. Love that thing.
Wow.
And I got the 60s kit. I think that wraps it up. Yeah, it's 8 kits, right? Yeah, half vintage, half modern. So. That's it.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, no, I love like all the old, older stuff as well. I've gotten on a kick with some of the 60s stuff. You found all the orphan drums, and rewrapping them and throwing them in. Like my tour kit for the last, not so much for 2020 because we weren't doing a lot of touring, but before that was actually a 20-inch 60s shell that somebody just said, yeah, the finish is destroyed. I'm like, well, the edges are fine. And I just rewrapped it, put some, new spurs on it so that it wouldn't move so much when I'm kicking it. And
cool.
Man, it sounds great. And I've got a whole project with some 60 shells I'm working on now. And yeah, I love there's something about those old signature kits, man. Like I tracked one down a few years ago, and like I finally got some new hardware to start mounting it. So I'm looking forward to tracking with it soon. But
yeah, dude, man,
they were like such a special drum set,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of the craziest veneers I've ever seen are on that kit. Like the inside of my 16-inch floor tom is crazy. It almost doesn't even look like Bubinga. It's the most figured thing I think I've ever seen. It's just completely insane.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. People, you will maybe appreciate and or be horrified at this story. I found a guy selling a kit, very low price, and he was located in like southern Georgia near Florida, which is a good drive from Nashville. So I called him and I'm like, if you're willing to do that price, and he didn't know anything about shipping drums. So I was like, all right, I'll meet you in Atlanta, which is about 4 hours from me, 4 hours from him. And literally the kit was in a barn. And it's a heavy, it's Bubinga. He pulls up to meet me in Atlanta, and he's got it in the back of his pickup truck. And it's like lightly raining, and I didn't have like a tarp on it.
Oh no.
And I feel like I was rescuing a puppy. I was like, give it here, here's your money, man. Just like get these in. And so, they had seen some days, had to do some work on the veneer to kind of bring it back to life. But yeah, I was like, maybe he just was some dude who had a drum set and posted on something. Anybody want to buy these? And I was like, are you kidding? I had the snare and everything. But like I said, I feel like I was on a rescue mission for these poor drums. I'm like, dude, this is a work of art. What are you doing?
That's it. Yeah. I'm definitely part horrified, but I'm glad they've got to a loving, caring home.
Yes, very much. Yeah. Yeah.
I had like a similar kind of find with my phonic kit. They weren't maybe quite as trashed, but a buddy sends me a message a couple of years ago. Things over in Calgary, which is I think like an 18-hour drive from me, but it just said vintage SONOR kit, $700, and the picture was like grainy and dark. And I'm looking at it, and it looks like there's just kind of like a kick and a couple of toms or whatever. So I click in. It's like, wait a minute, that's a phonic kit. So I'm looking closer. Turns out, for $700, this person had this thing just sitting in their basement. They got rid of it. It had double 24s, 14, 15, 16 racks, 18 floor, 2 non-matching snares, a ton of cymbals and hardware. No exaggeration, I sold the hardware and half the cymbals for more than I paid for that and kept all the drums.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah.
I mean,
they're
a touch beat, but after wash them down, they look pretty good. I mean, you can't tell from if it's in a video.
Yeah, exactly. Well, just to go back to it again, if you do want to purchase one of those older kits, you just know. I mean, again, as long as nothing's happened, no one cracked the shell or took a axe to the bearing edge, like it's going to be solid and it's going to hold up and it's still going to sound great. That was funny enough at the factory in the museum. They have 100-something-year-old little glockenspiel. That like you can still play on, lightly, but I played a few notes on it and I was like, this is insane, but what more do you need the proof of quality than like, hey, here's this instrument that's over 100 years old that you can still play, sounds fine. Of course, like I said, maybe don't take it on the road, but any of the stuff, 60s, 70s, 80s, of course, like all that stuff's gonna hold up. Like I said, as long as there hasn't been, any damage that would,
well, especially the 80s with those like inch thick shells.
Yeah, I know, man. That was actually the first guy I reached out to when I got that kit. He's actually Danny Carey's tech in the studio, or he's been for the last few records. And I was like, hey, man, has Danny used, because I never had square-sized drums. And I was like, what's going on with this? And he worked at Remo, and he was like, well, I'll give you some of the tuning things I do, just if you just want to get, because I was like, let me just get a reference. I mean, I'm not Danny Carey, I'm not going to sound like him, but his drums sound great always. So like, let me just get a reference of what he did. And so yeah, it was helpful. Then we were both just nerding out over it, as we all do with drum gear.
Of course.
But, looking at your snare wall behind you, this might be a hard question for you, but again, we do have a time constraint here. So if you had to pick your top 3 snare drums.
3.
Top 3.
Man, neutering me here.
I know.
Okay.
What would, and I'm sure, I'll tell you what, I'll give you this. The top 3 that you've been going to, because I feel the same. I might not play a drum for a year, and then I'll use on everything for a year. Like I'm always switching out stuff. So what's kind of your top 3 that are in the rotation as of late?
Okay. Well, LeBron's James never. He's always number one. The 14x8 cast heavy bronze. Yeah, and that was another sort of special one. They made me that with like the SQ2 black hardware and everything, and APS fittings and all that. Yeah,
how did that come to be? Because I know Drum Center Portsmouth did something a while back, but you've had that drum for a few years now, right?
Yeah. Well, they did that thing a year back or whatever because people kept asking them about mine.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah. When I went and visited the factory, they had I guess I was in one of the back rooms or whatever, and on a pallet they had a bunch of just kind of prototype stuff. And there was sitting a 14x8 cast bronze shell, undrilled. And I just stopped dead in my tracks because they haven't made that thing in like 15, 20 years. I was like, what the fuck is that thing doing there? I wouldn't even let it go. Anyway, long story short, this thing's over here now, and it's got all that SQ2 hardware, and it's like my most prized possession. So that thing, he's number one, and that'll probably never change. If I had to pick 2 more, though, it's real tough to whittle this down even a little bit. Well, here's what I've been playing the past couple of weeks. This is a 13x8 X-ray acrylic, and this drum just sounds fantastic. And I was really surprised with how the Evans UV2 sounded on top. They sent a set over here to test out when they came out with the UV2s, and I tried them on some toms. They sounded pretty good. And they sent enough that I could put them on all my X-ray snares. I got one of each. I got a 10x7, 12x7.5, 13x8. That's this one, and a 14x8. And man, does that thing ever sound amazing on this drum. So I've been really digging this thing up here lately. And if I had to pick just one more, this is again more just what I've been kind of playing currently, but there's a 14x6 beach heavy SQ2 with ebony inside and out. Of course, it's got those hella hoops on top and bottom. Man, does that thing sound good. Oh my God, the backbeats on that and ghost notes, just there's something real magical about that drum. And funny thing about that drum, that's the only SQ2 snare drum that I have that I didn't actually order. Another random Canadian Kijiji find. There was a dude, this time an 8-hour drive away, he was selling for 3,000 Canadian, which is like less than what the bass drum costs. 10, 12, 16, 22, and that thing of the Beach Vintage SQ2 kit that I have. So, man, when I saw that price, I was like, dude, I live in Winnipeg. I've literally got the money on the table in front of me, but I can't get out there for a couple of days. Can you hold this? I'm 100% in, like, no question. It's just like, sure. Yeah. So I drove there. I couldn't give the guy my money fast enough. Of course, I buzzed all the heads off and made sure the bearing edges were good. It's just like, nope, he's not ripping me off. I seriously did the 8-hour trek there, checked it out, gave him my money, 8-hour trek home, and set it up. And with the last little bit of my energy, it was like basically play till I had to pass out. Yeah, but that snare drum, man, does that thing sound good.
Oh, I'm sure, man. Yeah. Man, I didn't know Canada was just the gold mine of some sweet SONOR gear.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah, it's just random cool stuff. Actually, this maybe doesn't hit in the favorites category, but like of other random just things I've found used in Canada here, this thing is pretty cool. This is the only one of these I've ever seen in person. This is a free-floating 14x4.5 chrome over brass from the 60s. And this thing sounds awesome. And interesting thing about this is one of the, I think, only 8 things on the rarities page on sonormuseum.com. But when I got it, it had this sticker on it. And I was like, I guess I'll show it to the camera that we're actually going to be taking this feed from. But that sticker, I was gonna get rid of it. until I texted Thomas Barth. I mean, one who sort of set this whole thing
Oh,
up. And I was asking him about this sticker because it had like a kind of a German word. Turns out this is from like a small little town that's very close to the Sonar factory in Bad Barrelberg. So it must have been like a marching drum that ended up over there and somehow ended up in Canada and somehow ended up in my paws for way less money than it was worth. Well, I mean, I don't know what it goes for, but it was cheap enough that I just didn't hesitate. So yeah. Another random, just
that's awesome.
thing.
That is, man. Yeah, you never know, like when the, keep your eye out, that stuff's gonna pop up. I think weirdest, rarest thing was I got a 50s teardrop snare with the script logo. It's like a 13. It's before the international standard sizes. So I actually got to send it off at some point to Remo and have them. They say they can do like a 10-point measurement and like make heads for it because it's actually got calfskin on it still.
That's awesome.
But I bought it, found a guy online, and it was from Greece, $300 including shipping. I paid obviously through something. I'm like, oh, this is never going to show up. And I'm going to have to report this as a fraud and I'll get my money back. And like a week or 2 weeks later, however long it took, he has notice from some shipping company I've never heard of. It's like, because I gave him my email address and it popped up and I was just like, because that's the thing, stateside, you don't get to see some of that weird stuff, obviously just, it wasn't the global market back then that it is now. Yeah. So, that maybe, there just wasn't necessarily too many international drum manufacturers. You have people just manufacturing drums in each country. So that's super cool, man. I've never seen that. Maybe I've seen it on the Sonar Museum page, but never, I didn't know that was yours.
Yeah. It was one of those random things. I was just like, so listening, are you kidding me? What?
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, like I said, we could probably do an entire episode going through the collection, and maybe we'll do that for the next season as a bonus or something.
That's cool. But do like a studio tour.
Yeah, that'd be rad, man. Well, obviously, there's a lot changing still. What's things looking like for you coming up here in 2021? Obviously, I'm sure you'll be doing more teaching with Drumeo, but is there anything else that people can kind of keep an eye out for?
Yeah, there's a bunch of cool Drumeo stuff coming up. There's I think one of the next things coming out in Modern Drummer, I've got a 2 sort of month thing with Thomas Hawk we did, which is going to be super, super cool.
Oh, right.
Yeah, totally. And I don't know if we'll have it done this year. I hope so. But there's a new Third Eye on record in the works, and it's super, super weird, so that'll be fun. Yeah, those are kind of the most exciting things for me at the moment. But I mean, there's obviously less we can do right now. So
Yeah, for sure. And of course, if people do want to kind of keep tabs on what you got coming up in the more recent times, where's the best way they can find you?
Best place would be probably either Instagram or Facebook. Just Aaron Edgar Drum on either of those platforms. You'll find plenty of drum porn, and it's very drill-worthy sites.
Yeah. Well, man, I thank you so much for doing this. It was really fun. I'm glad we were able to make this happen. You were definitely on my list for the first season to,
awesome,
as I've envied over many times in your Instagram account. I don't let it affect me personally, as we said, but I have definitely drooled over your gear. So thanks again, man, for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. This was a pile of fun. It's always good to, talk shop.
Yeah. All right. Hey, and for everyone at home, stay safe, stay healthy, stay positive, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.